Om na brahma loke na cha deva loke na yaksha gandharva manushya loke lokasya jati jarapaneta nanyosti tvatto himanushya chandra vanditastvam surai sendraih rishibhischapi pujitah vaidyah sarvasya lokasya vandeham api tvam vibho. Neither in Brahmaloka nor in the world of the gods or celestial beings is there another equal to you, O moon among men, who removes the pains of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Worshipped by the gods and rishis, O physician of the world's ills, we worship thee, O Lord. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So this morning I want to speak on Swami Vivekananda and the spirit of America. The chant that I just did is actually a hymn to the Buddha, but it serves very well as a salutation to Swami Vivekananda as well. It says that worshipped by the gods and rishis, Sri Ramakrishna had the vision of Swami Vivekananda before he had met Swamiji. He had the vision that many of you know, where his mind went to higher and higher realms. He went to realms of the ideal forms of gods and goddesses, where he described it in the form of a journey. And that's the way that you explain such higher experiences. You have to put them in terms that people can understand. So he said that his mind went to higher and higher realms, and on both sides of the path as his mind was ascending. Not that his mind was going this way, and that there was a path with two sides to it on either side, but that's the only way one can explain such things which are beyond the ordinary experience. So he said as his mind ascended to higher and higher realms, he saw on both sides of the path. Well, first he said that he went beyond the realm of the sun and the moon and the stars and galaxies. And then he came to the ideal forms of gods and goddesses. And then he went beyond that to the realm of the indivisible, to the realm where even the gods and goddesses dared not look. And there in the midst of the realm of the indivisible, where he said that there was no trace of difference whatsoever, he saw 7 rishis seated, the Saptarshis, 7 rishis seated. So what that means also we can't understand, because he said he was in the realm of the indivisible, where there was no trace of difference whatsoever. So if there's no trace of difference, how do you get 7 rishis? If there's no trace of difference, how do you find them seated there in the realm of light? So that we can't understand. It was a transcendental experience, but he put it in language, poetic language, for our understanding. So there, among those 7 rishis, one of them was the future Swami Vivekananda, whom he recognized the first time he saw him, when Vivekananda was still a teenager. And so it says that worshipped by the gods and the rishis, he said that Swamiji, in his knowledge and in his spirituality, he was beyond even the realm of the gods. And physician of the world's ills, Sri Ramakrishna said that he brought him to this world as the physician of the world's ills. He didn't use that term, but that's certainly what he meant. And he said that he brought Swami Vivekananda to this realm in order to redirect society, in order to establish once again dharma around the world, not just in India. And so the beginning of the first verse says, "Neither in Brahmaloka nor in the world of gods or celestial beings is there another equal to you, O moon among men, Manushya Chandra." So he went beyond even the realm of the gods and goddesses. And there found Swami the future Vivekananda, who removes the pains of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And that, of course, was the Buddha's message, was to that life is suffering, but there is a way beyond suffering, beyond sickness, old age, and death. And so that Swamiji also showed to us in modern times in a Vedantic way, in a Vedantic context. So the reason for the topic today is that the 4th of July is this coming Thursday. And so I wanted to speak on the topic of Swami Vivekananda and the American spirit because of Swamiji's deep association with the 4th of July. He wrote a poem to the 4th of July when he was in Kashmir with Sister Nivedita, Josephine MacLeod, Sarah Bull, two of them Americans and one British. Nivedita was British, but Mrs. Oli Bull or Mrs. Sarah Bull and Josephine MacLeod were Americans. And so he wanted to celebrate with them the 4th of July in 1898. And so he wrote a poem to the 4th of July. And as many of you know, he also chose the 4th of July as the day for his own Mahasamadhi, a few days before his passing away, when he had given many clues that he was going to pass away, but nobody took them as clues. Nobody understood. Nobody could imagine that Swamiji, such a vital presence, such a young man, 39 years old, such a vital, vibrant personality. They couldn't imagine him ever being gone. But he'd given many clues, including quite clear indications. He said, "I will never live to see 40. And he died in his 39th year. He said when he came back from America in 1900 that I'm going back to India to die. And many, many other clues he said, or he gave, but people didn't understand them. And so another one was that a few days before he passed away, he asked for the almanac. He said that he wanted to look for an auspicious day for a journey. And nobody knew where he was planning to go. And at that point in his life, he had stopped traveling. His last trip was to Bangladesh, to Dhaka, at that time East Bengal, to Dhaka, Assam, etc. And so he said that he wanted to select an auspicious day for traveling. That wasn't like Swamiji, because though Sri Ramakrishna would always consult the almanac for auspicious days, Swami Vivekananda had nothing to do with that kind of thing. He thought that India had been harmed by too much attention to astrology and things like that. And so this was quite untypical for him, but he said, let me see the almanac. I want to choose an auspicious day for a journey. And so he marked the 4th of July, not because that was an auspicious day in the Indian almanac that year, but because it was the 4th of July, because of his deep and abiding love for the ideals represented by the American celebration. So let me speak a little bit about Swami Vivekananda's developing sense of mission. First of all, as many of you know, those of you who have studied or read Swamiji's life, that in the beginning, when he was Narendranath Datta, learning from Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna used to say great things about his future. And that was one of the reasons Swamiji thought that Sri Ramakrishna was a little unhinged. He thought that Ramakrishna, he'd never seen such purity, such devotion, such spiritual knowledge, such spiritual power. He'd never seen anything like Sri Ramakrishna. But when Sri Ramakrishna would go on praising him, Narendra, he felt that no, there's something wrong with this man. And he would even scold Sri Ramakrishna for praising him and comparing him superlatively to people like Keshav Chandra Sen, who was world famous at that time. In fact, it was through Keshav Chandra Sen that Max Muller found out about Sri Ramakrishna. Keshav had met the Queen, which in those days was a huge thing. Even today it's a big thing, but then it was even bigger when England was an actual empire. So Keshav Chandra Sen was world famous, and he was the idol of many, many people in Bengal in particular. And so Sri Ramakrishna would say that people like Keshav may have one or two powers of the Divine Mother, but my Narendra has all 16 powers of the Divine Mother, meaning the 16 parts that make the 16 annas that make up rupee, meaning that he had all of the powers of the Divine Mother. He would say some of these others are 1 or 2 petal lotuses, 16 petals at the most, but my Narendra is 1,000 petal lotus. And so again, Swamiji was not humble in the sense that he didn't like people talking about him, or he didn't like attention, or that it didn't matter to him whether people talked about him or didn't talk about him, whether people liked him or didn't like him. That mattered nothing to him. But Swamiji was from the beginning extraordinarily dedicated to the truth. And he wanted the truth, and he wanted the whole truth. And so he thought that Sri Ramakrishna, by exaggerating, was being untruthful. And at the same time, of course, he had seen that he had never met anyone so dedicated to truth as Sri Ramakrishna. So that was hard to put together, but he was bothered by the fact that Sri Ramakrishna was exaggerating. And so then at the end of Sri Ramakrishna's life, when he could no longer speak from cancer in the throat, and he was bedridden, then just towards the last day, Sri Ramakrishna wrote with chalk on a board, with a piece of charcoal. He wrote, "Narendra will teach people." And Narendra said, "No, I want to do that." And then Sri Ramakrishna, with his cancer of the throat, whispered out in the best way he could, "Your very bones will do it." So he had known from the beginning that Swamiji had a world mission and had prepared him for it. And Narendra dismissed it and tried to deny it throughout Sri Ramakrishna's lifetime. And then after Sri Ramakrishna passed away in August of 1886, and he began to travel around India, he tried to deny it then also. He kept trying to go off into the Himalayas to lose himself in meditation. And one way or another, Sri Ramakrishna, who had left the body, would appear and bring him back out of his meditation and make him continue his preparation for his world mission. And so finally, Swamiji realized that no, he did have a world mission. And as you know, he came to Chicago for the World's Parliament of Religions in 1893. And there also he tried not to come. Devotees of his, young men in Chennai, who became inspired by him when he came to Chennai, they raised money to send him to America. And Swamiji said, "No, I'm not sure that I'm to go, so distribute the money among the poor." And so he refused the money they had collected. And then he had a vision of Sri Ramakrishna walking across the water of the ocean, beckoning him, telling him to come and to follow him across the ocean. So from that, he felt that Sri Ramakrishna was calling him to travel across the ocean. And he wrote to the Holy Mother, who was in Calcutta, and asked her advice. And she wrote back and said, "I think that the Master is calling you across the ocean." And so then he felt sure that that's what he was to do. And so then again, money was given, and he traveled to Chicago. But when he first came to America, part of it was the external excuse to speak at the Parliament of Religions. But his real interest was in raising money to begin his work in India for the uplift of India. And so when he came here, he spoke at the parliament, and he knew the importance of the parliament. In fact, he told his brother disciples in Mumbai, before he got on the ship to come to set sail for America, he told his brother disciples whom he had by chance met in Mumbai, he said that somehow I feel that this, the Parliament of Religions, is being organized for this, meaning for himself. And of course, it turned out to be that way. He was by far the most popular speaker at the Parliament, and it was his introduction to the world. So it was a big deal. But in his mind, what he wanted more than anything was to raise money for the beginning of his work to regenerate India. And so his going to America, he saw it as an opportunity. He had heard that America is a very generous country. And so he thought that, well, there I can go. It's a rich country, an up-and-coming country, generous. They're open to new ideas. And so there I'll be able to raise money for my work here in India. And at the parliament again, he was extraordinarily popular, and people prevailed upon him to continue teaching. But during the first year and a half in America, many of his lectures were devoted to explaining India to the people. Explaining the real India and the ideal India, both to people, because he found that the Christian missionaries had given a very distorted view of India to the people in order to help them raise funds for their missions in India. And so they had, of course, told stories about the people throwing their children to crocodiles in the Ganges, and many other tales of horror. In fact, even some years ago, back in the early 1990s, I was in the car in San Diego, and I tuned to the radio to a station, and I picked up a preacher in Pasadena, California, who he and his daughter, they were missionaries to India in the 1990s. But they were evangelicals and of the very conservative right-wing type. And so they were making a pitch for people to send them money to help them with their missions in India. And they were telling about the benighted heathens in India and how they bow down to sticks and stones, and they worship trees, and they worship cows, and they worship other animals, and they worship sticks, and they worship the moon and the sun. And you can't believe the superstition in this country, and we are there to save the country and to bring them to Jesus. And so that was in the 1990s. So you can imagine what Swamiji faced in the 1890s when people didn't know much about India, especially in America. The Europe people were a little more aware of the world because Europe was closer and more tied to the rest of the world. But America was isolated by two oceans. And so what people knew about India, most people, the average person, was what they got from the missionaries who would come back from time to raise money. So Swamiji began his work explaining India to the people. And he was effective. He was attacked by the missionaries, severely attacked in the press, in society. They went around when Swamiji was going to a city, they would go and tell the people in the city that your daughters are not safe with this man. You should not host him. You should have nothing to do with him. There are terrible reports of things that he has done, all types of immorality in Chicago and other places. You should not have anything to do with him. And so he faced great difficulties, and publicly also they began to decry him. And so Swamiji stood up. Swamiji was not one to just humbly sneak away under oppression. He was like the Sikhs. When I was in Kashmir and Jammu about 3 years ago, 3 years ago. In Jammu, I met a Sikh who was from Kashmir, and I asked him, in Kashmir, I saw so many Sikhs still in Kashmir. Why is it that were the Sikhs not persecuted like the Hindus were? Why are there so many Sikhs? He said, no, that's because we are military people. If somebody says you get out, then we say you make us get out. So Swamiji was like that. He had the spirit of a Kshatriya. So in the face of the opposition of Christian missionaries, he stood up and faced the people. And by the end of 1894, again, he came in the middle of, or the latter part of 1893. By the end of 1894, the donations to missionaries in America had dropped by 1/3. And so he was very effective in, not that Swamiji had anything against Christianity, but he had a lot against the missionaries who were misrepresenting India, denigrating India. So again, that first period was to explain India to the American people. And then people began to write in the newspapers that why are we sending missionaries to a land which can produce a man who's more learned than all of our professors put together. And so he had a tremendous effect. But he also found, as I said, that he had come here to raise money, but he, as he said in one of his letters, he said also in a talk at the Parliament of Religions, that he realized how difficult it was for a heathen like himself to raise money in a Christian country. So he found that though America was a generous country, that raising money for work in India on India's terms was difficult. That people were ready to give money for somebody to go and teach the American way to do things, which included the Christian way to do things, to impose Western culture, to impose Western religion and so forth on India, that people were ready to give money to. But to give money to a heathen who was going back to the heathens to teach them how to raise themselves on their own terms, that people weren't so ready to do. But by the end of 1894, in a question and answer session after a talk in New York City, he said in answer to one of the questions, "I have a message for the West as Buddha had a message for the East." By that time, he had become fully conscious of the fact that, no, I'm here for a higher purpose, not just to raise money for my work in India. Till the end of his life, he was concerned about the regeneration of India. So that never left him. But he realized, no, I have a world mission, not just a mission for India. I have a world mission. And I have a message to the West as Buddha had a message to the East. So that's not a small statement coming from somebody like Swami Vivekananda, who was a great student, deep student, profound student of history. He knew fully well what that meant to say, I have a message for the West as Buddha had a message for the East. Buddha's message transformed the East. The teachings of Buddha, as they spread out of India into country after country, all the way up to the borders of Europe and all the way east through Indonesia, up China and Korea, Japan. It brought golden periods of civilization into every country where Buddhism spread. It transformed the whole of the East. Incredible, the changes and the cultural flowering and the growth of spirituality that came with the spread of Buddhism through the East. And so Swamiji was aware of all of that. He was fully aware of that. So when he said, I have a message for the West as Buddha had a message for the East, he was fully conscious of what he was saying. He was fully conscious that he wasn't talking about some small little message that could be put in a little book and people would read it and find it inspiring. No, that he had something, that he had a message that he foresaw would transform the Western world. And not just the Western world. He was concerned about Africa. He was concerned about all parts of the world. But at that time, because of the colonial period, which he was something which he found great distaste, or which he had great distaste for, a great dislike for the colonial mentality. But at the same time, he saw that great good was coming through it, eventual great good, great harm in the short term, great good in the long term. And that was because it connected people, all parts of the world. The colonial powers, especially England, connected the whole world so that an idea given in one part of the world would spread through the arteries of communication to all parts of the world. And so he saw that at that time, Western culture was the colonializing power. and that ideas given in the hearts of Western civilization would spread throughout the world in time. And so he realized that this was the place where his ideas could be given voice to with the maximum effect. He even said that the work, he said to his brother disciples and his own Indian disciples back in India, he said that we should send our best monks. He was talking about the Vedanta work, the burgeoning Ramakrishna mission. He said that we should send our best out into the world, because whatever work we do outside of India will help India far more than anything we do within India. And that was because it would improve the relationship of the rest of the world with India, create sympathy for India and the rest of the world, and thereby open paths for development within India as well. So there were certain things that Swamiji loved especially about America. So I want to speak about those for a few minutes before I come to his message for America, his message for the West as Buddha had a message for the East. Because Swamiji could scold severely. He was known for his severe scoldings. But behind Swamiji's scoldings was deep love. And so once when I was a young brahmachari and living in India at Belramat back in the mid-70s, one of our acharyas went on for 3 days saying everything terrible about the West and about America and how it's a hopeless, terrible country. Everybody is worldly, everybody is materialistic, everybody is, there's no spirituality, there's no religion, there's no nothing. And so the brahmacharis kept coming to me and saying, why do you allow the acharya to go on like that? He's talking the whole day just about how horrible the West is. Don't you have any pride or something? And so finally, after the third day, I did speak up and just told the acharya that everything is not like that. So there are good things and there are bad things. I don't deny the bad things, but there are good things there too. And so that got reported to the headquarters. And so I was taken to the headquarters and and had to face the senior assistant secretary. And he was very sympathetic. He asked me what the problem was. And I tried to explain, and he said, but Swamiji himself criticized America very severely. And I said, yes, he did. And he opened the complete works and read to me one of those passages where Swamiji excoriates America in particular. And I said, yes, Maharaj, and I have no trouble with that. I accept what Swamiji said, because Swamiji also loved America. And so that we always have to learn, there's a universal there that we have to learn, that we have no right to scold somebody unless we love them. If we don't love them, then we should keep our hands off, leave people alone. And the best policy is generally to leave people alone. But if we love a person or a people, or a country, or an organization, if we love them, and that's clear, then we have a right to scold. And Swamiji had that right, because he loved America deeply. So he could scold. So one of the first things he fell in love with here when he was still in Chicago at the Parliament of Religions, was, as I've said recently in a talk, was organization. I told the story just the other day, how I heard this from Cornelia Conger, in whose house this happened. She was the granddaughter of Mr. and Mrs. Lyons of Chicago, who were the hosts of Swamiji during the Parliament of Religions. The Hills weren't the hosts of Swamiji at that time. They were later. They were the ones who rescued him from the street when he had no credentials, but he was put up with the Lyon family. So Cornelia Conger, the granddaughter, she was 6 years old at that time. So she said that one day Swamiji came back home from his day in the city and said, Ms. Lyons, or mother as he called her, mother, I've had the greatest temptation of my life today. And Ms. Lyons said, but Swamiji, what is her name? And Swamiji laughed and said, no, madam, it's not a woman, it's organization. I've seen what great things can be done through organization, how through organizing human energies, they can be directed towards a purpose. And so Swamiji saw the great value of organization, and that he recognized that though organization always has problems, you can't have any organization without problems, without creating problems. At the same time, he found that without organization also, you can't sustain a movement. That it's only with organization that a movement can be carried forward and sustained for long periods of time. As I said the other day, many of you weren't here, so it's no harm in repeating it now. And the rest of you have probably forgotten. So, you see the difference between Christianity and Buddhism on the one hand, and the Bengal Vaishnava movement on the other, that was founded by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya was as great as the Buddha and Christ. He was a great incarnation of God, a tremendous personality. And yet he created no organization. It was just the guru-disciple relationship and so forth, but no organization. And yet Christ and Buddha, they both organized. They both established a movement to carry forward their ideas. And so Christianity and Buddhism spread over the world. And yet Bengal Vaishnavism, well, yes, now through Krishna consciousness, through ISKCON, it's come to other countries, but still, that was only when they formed the organization ISKCON 40 years ago. Before that, it was a minor player in the world religious field, unknown outside of eastern India, Bengal, Orissa, etc. So Swamiji saw the power of organization, but he also realized that organization creates problems as well. So that was one of the things that he found here. And it's interesting that of all modern Western countries, America has more in common with ancient Rome than any of the other countries. It was in ancient Rome that modern organization was really developed. All countries, all societies have had organization. There's no place in the world that even tribal societies, they are organized as well. So organization is universal. If you have two people together, you begin to organize. That's the way society works. That's what society means. You have two individuals, they become a society. Even two individuals become a society because of cooperation, which requires organization. But organization in the modern sense, that really was developed in ancient Rome, carried forward by the Roman Catholic Church, or the Catholic Church and the Orthodox churches. But in modern times, it was America more than any country that represented the power of organizing, with both the good sides of organization and the bad sides, the weaknesses as well as the virtues of organization. And so it was natural that Swamiji would see that here. And because of his brilliant mind, he saw it quite early, early in his mission. So another thing that he saw quite early, because it was the time of the Columbian Exposition in 1893 in Chicago, he saw that America was a place, and of course he had read about this also, but he saw it firsthand when he got here, that it was a place that was a country that was where the people were ready to try new things. As he said later, that in America, every new idea finds a home, that people are ready to try new things. You see that even today, that any new idea finds a home here. People who are ready to give it a try. And so that he saw that made it a fertile field for his ideas. He said about England, that England, if the English take hold of an idea, once they take hold of an idea, they don't give it up. But to get them to take hold of a new idea is much more difficult. One of our nuns in Hollywood, Saradesha Prana, she's British, and her grandparents were in the British Raj. They were helped, I don't know what their position was, but it was high up in the Indian Railway. And so her grandmother, she said her grandmother lived in India for something like 50 years. And yet when she came back from India, then you couldn't tell that she had ever been to India. There was no trace of it. An American goes to India, and after 2 weeks, they start shaking their head like this. And they start saying, you say something to them, and they start saying, "Acha." But this British lady, she lived there for 50 years in India. And there was no trace that she had ever been in India. Atmarupananda says the only trace that you could find was that she liked certain chutneys. And that was the only influence that she took away from India. And so he found that here there was a country where people were fond of new ideas, ready to give expression to new ideas, take up new ideas, try things. And that he liked. He saw the weakness in everything that Swamiji loved about America. He also saw a weakness, and that's important. And so as I go through this short list, I'll mention the weaknesses also. He saw also the weakness that people become faddists. I remember once in San Diego when I was there, I found some beautiful stationery paper for our letterhead. It was a beautiful tone of orange. It was about this color, but it was textured paper and very beautiful paper. And so I bought it and had our letterhead printed on it and everything. A couple of years later, I went back for more, and I couldn't find it in the stationery store. And I asked, what happened to that paper? And I had a sample. He said, "Oh, that was that year's color. Now this year, that's not one of the colors this year." So, my goodness, you have this year's color and last year's color. Why can't you just have colors? Well, why is it that the one color is appropriate for this year and that was appropriate for 2 years ago? It's still a good color. But he saw that here there were people were faddish and jumped from idea to idea. But at the same time, on the good side, he saw that people were ready to take up new ideas. And so he had a new message, a revolutionarily new message for the West. And that I'll come to at the conclusion, a revolutionary new message for the West. And so he saw that this was a place where that message could potentially gain ground. He also saw that because it was a country that was ready to take up new ideas, that it was a country of opportunity. It was a country of opportunity for people as well. He talked about how he would see in New York immigrants coming from Europe, poor, with nothing but a little bag of belongings on their back. They didn't bring much of anything, just a little bag of belongings from Ireland and Italy and other countries, the poor of these countries coming to America as immigrants. He said they'd get off the boat and they would be bent over like this and looking miserable. And he said 6 months later they would be walking as men among men, feeling that, yes, I am a man among men. I don't have to bow my head before anybody. Whereas in Europe they had been trampled. And so he saw that, yes, it was a country that was ready to try new things. It was a country that was ready to give opportunity to people as well. Another thing he saw, which he loved, was practicality. When Buddhism spread into different countries, one of the great things that Buddhism did, and one of the reasons why it was so successful, without any bloodshed, the only missionary religion that spread without any bloodshed at all, was that they adapted themselves to the local culture. They didn't try to take Indian culture and stamp it on wherever they went. Yes, the riches of Indian culture were made available through Buddhism to everyone. And so Indian grammar and writing systems and all of that traveled with Buddhism into countries, creating cultural flowering everywhere it went. But it didn't enforce Indian cultural ways on the countries where it went. And so when Buddhism went to China, it took off in China once they found a way to indigenize Buddhism in China. Once they had an indigenous expression of Buddhism in China. And part of that was that the Chinese people were less idealistic and more practical. They were less God-centric. They weren't God-centric, but they were man-centric, humanity-centric. They were humanists. And so once Buddhism took on that form, then it spread rapidly through the country. And so Swamiji saw that Vedanta, as it spread through the world, would have to do the same. And so one of the things that in time and that I'll come to in a few minutes. But he loved the practicality of the country. He loved the strength and the self-confidence that he found here. And that was something that he wanted to give back to India. After years of centuries of domination, outside domination, he wanted India once again to have the strength and self-confidence it had once had. And so that he liked here as well. The idealism that he found in America, again, the people were primarily practical, but he found that here was a country that was not founded on just tribal connections and so forth, as most countries around the world. Most countries are the indigenous people from ancient times just developed, and things just developed organically. But America was founded on ideals, and that he saw as a great opportunity also, that no matter how poorly she has lived up to some of those ideals through her short history, but the ideals are there, and he had great love for those ideals, and that's why he chose the 4th of July as his day for his own infinite freedom from the body. So, and I'll come back to that in a moment also, the ideals. The ideal of freedom, the ideal of equality, the general ideal of democracy, all of these things he saw as having great promise for the future. Not as we see nowadays in America, the idea of imposing American democracy in the world. That Swamiji never would have supported that. He never supported imposing anything on others. That's a terribly destructive process. That's what most missionary religions, the source of the great harm they did in the world was that, thinking that we have the right religion, everybody else is wrong, and we're going to force people to take our ideas. And so whether it's in religion, whether it's a social idea, whether it's a political idea, a political system, an organization, whatever. Swamiji was against imposing anything on others. Let people develop and grow from inside, and give life-giving ideas, and then let people, if they find that beneficial, let them take it up and express it themselves. And so, but he did see the democracy, the ideal of democracy, not the American system, political system, but the ideal of democracy, which was flourishing in this country. You saw that that had great promise for the world. And you see now that all over the world, people, even in countries where people are not friendly towards the United States, everywhere people are struggling for autonomy, for self-autonomy, for democracy, for self-determination. You see everywhere that wish for self-determination. And so he saw in that something that was very promising for the future. So now let me come, before closing, let me come to the message of Swamiji. He said that I have a message for the West as Buddha had a message for the East. So what was that message? I can't pretend to do justice to the fullness and the power and the extent of his message. So I'll just give a few elements of that message. But to really understand Swamiji, one has to spend a lifetime studying him, a lifetime dedicated to trying to understand him. Let me first say, before I come to the actual message, that what did Swamiji do? What was his main work? His main work wasn't giving lectures. It wasn't going around meeting people. It wasn't talking to people. It wasn't through his writings. The main thing that Swamiji did was that he sowed seeds of power into the heart of the world. He said that this time, meaning with Sri Ramakrishna's incarnation, this time the Brahma Kundalini has been awakened. That is, the Kundalini of the whole world has been awakened by the advent of Sri Ramakrishna. We may not see evidence of that yet, but there is evidence of it for those who have eyes to see. There's evidence all around us. It's just that it's not clear yet, except for those who have studied such things. But he said that Sri Ramakrishna had awakened the spirituality of the whole world, and in time that would become visibly manifest. And what Swamiji did, his special task in that, was to take that power which Sri Ramakrishna had brought and to make it living in the experience of the people of the world, and to change the very direction of society. To change the very direction of society. That only Swamiji could do. Sri Ramakrishna couldn't do that because Sri Ramakrishna had no idea of the greater world, the history of the world, the economic systems of the world, the social systems of the world, the problems the world was facing, the historical conditions and all of that. So that's why Swamiji traveled around India first and then traveled around the world. He had a educated mind in the modern sense. And so he was aware of history. He was a deep student of history, a deep student of humanity, a deep student of human institutions. And so he saw the needs of humanity in the present day. So he was able to take the ideas of Sri Ramakrishna and to direct them for the welfare of humanity. And not just through his lectures and writings, primarily through working on the collective mind itself. That is, by giving a nudge to the collective mind itself, giving a nudge, giving a direction, a new direction to society itself, at the deep layers of the collective human mind. So Swamiji worked at the ordinary level. We can see through his lectures and writings and so forth. But much more important than that was what he was doing at a much deeper, more fundamental level. Such people as Swami Vivekananda, the Christs and Buddhas of the world, and the Swami Vivekanandas of the world, they work at a deep level, giving a new direction to human society. And so that Swamiji did. And fundamental to that was his message of the divinity of every human being. The divinity of every human being. And that's a profound thing. It was something that people here had never heard, never thought of. After 2,000 years of hearing that you are sinners, that you are weak, that you are dependent, Swamiji came and said, no, all power is inside of you. You're all gods. He said that in Vedanta, one God is not enough. All of you are gods. Everything in the universe is divine. And so learn to act on that. Learn first to believe it, understand it, that I am divine, that nothing in life can overcome me, that I have the power within me to overcome every obstacle that I have to face. And let me learn to call that power up. Let me learn to call that purity up. Let me learn to call that wisdom up that is within each one of us. And so he gave a new understanding of human nature. Through that idea of the divinity of all beings, he gave a spiritual foundation to the ideals of democracy itself. Again, there are many different expressions of democracy. India has one, America has one, different European countries have others, and so forth. And other countries in the world have their forms of democracy, and other countries are struggling to form their own type of democracy. But at the heart of the democratic ideal itself, because the urge seen all over the world is the same urge. That is the urge that everyone feels that I want to be my own person. I want to be free. I want to be able to express myself. I want to be able to develop and live my own life. And so at the heart of that, Swamiji gave a spiritual foundation, the divinity of every being. Are all beings created equal? No, of course not. People aren't, of course they're not created equal. There's a difference everywhere. Some people who are strong, some people who are weak, some people who are intelligent, some people who are not intelligent, some people who are talented, some people who don't seem to have much of any talent, people who are successful, people who seem to fail at everything through life. So where is the equality? And yet we have that belief that no, there should be an equality. There should be some basis for equality. And so Swamiji pointed to that. The basis for the impulse towards equality is that everyone is of equal value, because everyone is the same reality. Everyone is a different expression of the same divinity. You may be one expression, I may be another. He or she may be other still expressions of that same divinity. But as expressions of divinity, each of us is equal. By some is unfounded in reality. It's not founded in necessity. It's just founded in the bullying tendency that we have developed as human beings over thousands of years of development. That everyone should be given a place of respect. Everyone should be given a place where they have the opportunity to develop. Some will take it, some won't. Even those who don't, they still deserve respect. Swamiji said, even the murderer who is being hung, in those days when hanging was the means of execution in this country, he said, even the murderer who is being hung is perfect God, perfect God. That doesn't mean that you let them free and let them go about murdering people. No, society has a right to protect the innocent. But we can't lose that vision that everyone has the same divine reality. Some express it in one way, some in another way, some in good ways, some in bad ways. But even those who express it in a bad way, if we have the understanding that they too are divine, then we won't have that vindictive attitude which is so common today, especially in America. This vindictive attitude is something which has become so strong here, that someone who has harmed me must be punished to the full extent of the law. Oh yes, let them be punished. Yes, certainly there's a place for the criminal justice system, for corrections and all of that. But even after a person has paid their dues to society and has shown that they are reformed, that they've become a good person, still there are people who say, no, they should continue to be punished. No. If we believe in the dignity of every person, if we believe in the divinity of every person, if a person has reformed, we should rejoice in that and want to have them prove themselves again, to give them a new chance. We should rejoice in that and not think that, no, I suffered, so I want them to suffer for the rest of their lives and I want them to die miserably. No, that's just vindictiveness. That has nothing to do with spirituality. And so this idea that Swamiji was central to Swamiji's message, the divinity of all beings, that's really the key to all of Swamiji's message. He said that my message can indeed be put into a few words, and that is to teach unto mankind their divinity and how to give expression to it in every movement of life. That's the very heart of Swamiji's message. And so it comes out in all different aspects of his message. For instance, another thing that Swamiji did was that he gave a sense of purpose to life. Even now in America, if you go out and ask most people what's the purpose of life, they won't even understand the question. And if they have a minute to think about it, and they say, well, to have a good time. Have a good time. Shop until you drop. But the idea that no, there is a higher purpose to life. That through all of our happiness and tears, through all of our successes and failures, through all of our mistakes and the good things that we do, through all of that, consciously or unconsciously, and for most it's unconsciously, we're winding ourselves towards a universal purpose. We're growing towards an infinite goal, a goal of infinite fulfillment. That idea was not here. Even in Christianity, the idea was that the goal is to be a good person and then die and go to heaven. But there was no proof that there was a heaven, no proof that there was a God. And so just be good, do good, and try to get through life somehow. And then when you die, heaven will make up for everything that was missing in this life. But Swamiji saw, he understood, and he also saw that to a thinking people, people where education was spreading among the common people, that religion won't long satisfy people. The idea that, well, I have to believe in God and heaven just because if I don't, then there's no meaning to life, and so let me believe in it. No, he saw that religion had to be founded on reason. That the Western fight between religion and science, between religion and reason, that had to go. That religion itself had to be founded on reason. That religion itself had to be scientific in the sense of experimental and experiential. That religion, spirituality is for experience. Is for experience. And that the whole of life is an experiment. Each of us is experimenting in our own way with reality, trying to understand what is the world, who am I, what is real, what is unreal. And we're all wending our way towards an ultimate goal. And so Swamiji's message of the divinity of human beings gives a end goal, an ultimate goal, that is a realization of our own innate divinity. And also it colors all of our proximate goals, our temporary goals. If all power is inside of me, if all knowledge is inside of me, and if the same is inside of everyone, then let me express it in my daily life, learn to express it, even at lower levels. Let me help others learn to express it also, even at ordinary levels. Swamiji said that this knowledge will help a fisherman be a better fisherman. Yes, it will help a fisherman fish better. It will help a student be a better student. It will help a lawyer be a better lawyer. It will help a doctor be a better doctor. He said it will help you in your present everyday concerns. And he said eventually it will help you to realize the highest goal of life. And so this divinity of the soul was the very heart of his message. And so with that, let me bring it to a conclusion. That Swamiji said great things about this country, and he said severe scoldings to the people of this country, both. But his scoldings were founded on love, just as with India. There was no place on earth where Swamiji scolded people so severely as he scolded India. But he did that because of his profound, not just love for India, but his identification with India. He saw India as his own self. He saw that he was India. So here also, one of the things I found when I first came to Vedanta was when I discovered Swamiji, I came to join the order in Chicago before I had read anything about Swamiji. I didn't know anything about him. I'd read about Sri Ramakrishna and about Vedanta philosophy. But once I began to study Swamiji, to read Swamiji, from the very first book I was given, The Life of Vivekananda by Swami Nikhilananda, I saw that here's someone who speaks my own language. And I don't mean just English, but he spoke in terms that I could understand immediately. I didn't have to do any cultural translation when reading. Like when reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which is a beautiful text, a wonderful text, which one can study for their whole life or for many lifetimes. But when I read that, I saw I had to do a cultural translation because it was culturally very unfamiliar to me. But with Swamiji, he was speaking my own language, the language of my own mind, the language of my own thinking. And so Swamiji spoke to the American spirit. He gave a new foundation to the ideals of America. He spiritualized them. And in time, I'm sure that will bring profound good to the country. Swamiji saw that within America, one of the things he criticized was he saw that there was a deep streak of violence within America, and that he lamented. At the Parliament of Religions, he spoke so beautifully. He said, "Hail Columbia, motherland of liberty, who never discovered that the quickest way to enrich herself was to harm other countries." Well, that didn't last long. That didn't last long. And Swamiji in time realized that was an ideal in America, but an ideal unlived, that was unlived, unexpressed, an ideal the country had not lived up to. And so he saw that within America there was a deep trend of violence, there was a trend of vindictiveness, some of the negatives. But he said in his lecture, "Is Vedanta the Future Religion?" which was directed to the very heart of America. One of his, not his last, but one of his last lectures in this country. A beautiful lecture, uncompromising lecture. He said, "Is there a possibility of Vedanta becoming the religion of a country like the United States?" He said, "Only if you become real men and women. Only if you that America had a lot of experience to go through before it would attain to maturity as a country. And so that we see now, that we see all around us now. But my conviction is that Swami Vivekananda, because he spent the best years of his life here in this country, that won't go to waste. That won't go to waste. Swamiji said that in time, America would solve the problem of the common man, the problem of the common man. That is, how to uplift the common man. The danger in the present age, the age of the common man, which we see all around us, it is the age of the common man. It's not the age of kings and queens. It's not the age of the priests. It's not the age of the capitalists, of the money holders in the banks. It's the age of the common man, which is growing up all around the world. And the danger of that is that the common man is apt to be satisfied with bread and circuses, as they called it in Rome. That is, in Rome, they said you could keep the masses peaceful by giving them bread and circuses. Feed their stomachs and give them entertainment, and then they won't bother you. All ideas of democracy and all of that, and sharing power and all of that is gone. They won't revolt. Just keep them fat and happy. And so the danger is, in the age of the common man, that the culture will go down. But Swamiji foresaw that through modern education, the spread of education, that was the key to the modern age, that through that the common man could be lifted up, the culture could be spread, and that the whole of society could be uplifted. And so that was the ideal Swamiji saw for the present age. He saw that the solution for the problems in India was education. The solution for the problems in America is education. The solution of the problems around the world is education. And the more I've traveled to different countries around the world, the more I've seen the truth of that. That in countries where it seems like the problems are intractable, unsolvable, that there with the spread of education you see that the things beginning to right themselves. And the fanaticism that we see all around the world, including in this country, the fanaticism, the discrimination, all of that, those things, the solution for those are true education. What Swamiji always called true education. Not just what Sri Ramakrishna criticized as a bread-winning education, just learning how to do a trade so you can make money, but real education, education of the mind and heart. So that is the secret to the solution of the problems of the world. And that's the solution of the problems even in this country. You may say that, well, education is already spread widely, but not real education. Not real education. That has yet to come to this country. So with that, I'll close. And it's already over time, so I won't ask for questions today. I'm sorry for that. I'll give a closing chant and then announcements. Om Dio Shanti Antariksham Shanti Prithvi Shanti Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sama Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace is in the heavens, peace is in the sky, peace is on earth. Peace is in the waters, peace in the plants and the trees. The gods are peace. Peace is the nature of truth. All is peace. Peace alone, peace. May that peace, real peace, be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe. So for announcements, on Tuesday we will have the usual Bhagavad Gita class at 7:30. On Thursday there'll be the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class at 11 o'clock in the morning. And on Sunday there will be a lecture on science and spirituality. And also today, after the food, everyone as usual is invited to stay for the arati, which we'll have now, and then food served to all. And then we're having our first Durga Puja meeting. We'll start after food, but that means usually about 1:15. So those who would like to be involved in helping with the Durga Puja, it's our largest celebration of the year. Last year we had more than 700 people come. And so it's a big event, and we need the help of all of those who wish to volunteer. And so the meeting will be very short today. Today the meeting is really just to get people up to speed with the fact that we are approaching Durga Puja, the date, and the tasks that we need help with. And so the meeting won't take long. Ashok Dasgupta last year and this year, and previously also, has been the coordinator of Durga Puja. He will be this year also, but he's in India right now, won't return until the end of July. And so I will be conducting the meeting today, and he will take over when he returns. So all of those who would like to help with the Durga Puja, please stay after food. So now we'll have the arati.